A pill your doctor prescribed last year might be eating your brain alive right now. Not slowly, rapidly. And by the time you notice, the damage is already permanent. I watched a 69-year-old retired engineer come into my ER last month. Couldn't remember his daughter's name. Couldn't find his car in the parking lot. Wife said he was sharp as a razor 8 months ago. Did crossword puzzles. Managed his own finances. Argued politics at dinner. Now he stares at walls, not Alzheimer's, not a stroke, not a tumor. His medication list, 4 pills, 3 of them on the list I'm about to show you, prescribed by his own doctor, refilled every 30 days. No warning, no cognitive screening. No one ever told him these drugs cross the blood-brain barrier and shred acetylcholine, the one neurotransmitter keeping his memory intact. This is happening everywhere right now. A 2023 study from the University of California found that 47% of seniors over 60 are currently taking at least one medication with strong anticholinergic properties. 47%. Nearly half. And the risk of rapid onset dementia with these drugs increases 300% after just 3 years of continuous use. Your doctor isn't evil. Your doctor has 7 minutes per appointment, 14 medications to review. Zero incentive to dig into cognitive side effect profiles on drugs that technically work for what they were prescribed for. The system doesn't reward prevention, it rewards prescriptions. The pharmaceutical industry made $1.4 trillion last year. Not 1 cent of that went toward warning you which of your pills is silently dissolving your memory. In this video, we will reveal 9 of the most common medications linked to rapid cognitive decline after 60, ranked from concerning to devastating. Number 2 is in medicine cabinets of nearly every household in America. Every reference is in the description. Where are you watching from? Drop it. I read every comment. Now let's start with medication number 9. This drug is handed out like candy and most seniors take it without thinking twice. Number 9, oxybutynin. If you struggle with frequent urination or an overactive bladder, chances are you have heard of oxybutynin. It is one of the most widely prescribed medications for bladder control, sold under brand names like Ditropan. Millions of older adults rely on it daily just to get through the day without embarrassing accidents. It works by relaxing the bladder muscles so they do not squeeze at the wrong time. Sounds harmless enough, but here is the problem. Oxybutynin is what scientists call a strong anticholinergic drug. That means it aggressively blocks acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter your brain depends on for memory and learning. A 2006 study published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society tested cognitive function in older adults taking oxybutynin and found measurable declines in memory and attention in as little as 4 weeks. Think about that. Just 1 month of use and researchers could already detect brain changes. Another study from 2015 at the University of Washington tracked over 3,400 adults aged 65 and older for an average of 7 years. Those who used anticholinergic drugs like oxybutynin had a 63% higher risk of developing dementia compared to those who never used them. The risk, clears throat, increased with higher doses and longer use. What makes oxybutynin particularly dangerous is that unlike some similar drugs, it crosses the blood-brain barrier very easily. The blood-brain barrier is basically a security wall that protects your brain from harmful substances in your bloodstream. Oxybutynin slips right past it. Once inside the brain, it starts interfering with acetylcholine signaling in areas responsible for memory formation, especially the hippocampus. The good news is that safer alternatives exist. Merigrin, sold as Myrbetriq, works through a completely different mechanism. It activates beta-3 receptors in the bladder instead of blocking acetylcholine. Studies show it controls bladder symptoms effectively without the cognitive side effects. Pelvic floor exercises, sometimes called schedules, have also been shown in clinical trials to reduce urinary urgency by up to 70% in older adults when practiced consistently. If you or someone you love takes oxybutynin, please talk to your doctor about switching. Your bladder matters, but so does your brain. Now let us move to number 8, a medication that might surprise you even more. Number 8, paroxetine. Depression is incredibly common in older adults. Nearly 7 million Americans over 65 experience it, and paroxetine, known by the brand name Paxil, has been a go-to treatment for decades. It belongs to a class called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SRA. Most SRIs are considered relatively safe for the brain, but paroxetine is different. Among all the SSRIs available, paroxetine has the strongest anticholinergic activity. A 2016 study published in JAMA examined brain scans of older adults taking anticholinergic medications, including paroxetine. The researchers at Indiana University found that these individuals had reduced brain metabolism and smaller brain volumes, particularly in regions associated with memory. They also performed worse on cognitive tests, measuring short-term memory and executive function. Another major analysis published in the British Medical Journal in 2018 looked at over 40,000 dementia patients and matched them with healthy controls. The study found that exposure to anticholinergic antidepressants like paroxetine was associated with a 29% increased risk of dementia even when use occurred 15 to 20 years before diagnosis. That last finding is particularly alarming because it suggests that damage may begin long before symptoms appear. Paroxetine also has one of the worst withdrawal profiles among antidepressants. Stopping it abruptly can cause dizziness, nausea, and something patients describe as brain zaps, which are sudden jolts of electrical sensation in the head. This makes it hard for people to quit even when they want to. The good news is that several other series treat depression just as effectively without the anticholinergic burden. Sertraline, known as Zoloft, and escitalopram G, known as Lexapro, both have minimal anticholinergic effects. A 2020 comparative study found sertraline to be equally effective as paroxetine for late-life depression with significantly fewer cognitive side effects. Cognitive behavioral therapy has also been shown in multiple randomized controlled trials to be as effective as medication for moderate depression in older adults. If you take paroxetine, do not stop it on your own. Work with your doctor to taper off safely and explore alternatives. But up next at number 7, we have a medication that almost everyone has used at some point in their life. Number 7, chloroform. You know those older allergy and cold medications that make you drowsy? The ones your parents probably gave you as a kid? Chlorpheniramine is one of the most common. You will find it in products like Chlorian and in many over-the-counter cold and flu combination medicines. It is a first-generation antihistamine, meaning it was designed decades ago before scientists fully understood how these drugs affected the brain. Unlike newer antihistamines, chloroform crosses the blood-brain barrier with ease and blocks acetylcholine receptors throughout the central nervous system. A comprehensive review published in the Journal of Clinical Pharmacy and Therapeutics in 2017 analyzed 18 studies on first-generation antihistamines and cognitive function. The review found consistent evidence that these medications impair attention, reaction time, and working memory in older adults. One study within the review showed that a single dose of chloroform reduced cognitive performance by approximately 25% in adults over 60 compared to a placebo. That is from just one pill. The University of Washington study we mentioned earlier also included first-generation antihistamines in its analysis. Cumulative use over 3 years or more was associated with a significantly higher dementia risk. The problem is compounded by the fact that many people do not even realize they are taking chlorine. It hides inside combination products marketed for colds, allergies, and sinus relief. You might be taking it right now without knowing. The safer alternatives are second-generation antihistamines like Cetirizine, sold as Zyrec, Loratadine, sold as Claritin, and Fexopenodine, sold as Algra. These newer drugs were specifically designed to stay out of the brain. A 2019 pharmacological study confirmed that second-generation antihistamines produce no significant anticholinergic effects in the central nervous system. They control allergy symptoms just as well without making you drowsy or foggy. Nasal corticosteroid sprays like fluticasone are another excellent option for allergy management. They work locally in the nasal passages and have virtually no systemic brain effects. Always check the ingredients on any cold or allergy product before buying it. Now let us look at number 6, a medication used by millions for a very different purpose entirely. Before we continue, take a second to like this video and subscribe. There's even bigger insight right after this. Number 6, Tultradine. Tultradine, brand name, is another medication prescribed for overactive bladder. When oxybutynin side effects became more widely recognized, many doctors started switching patients to Tultradine, believing it was a safer choice, and in some ways it is. Tultradine does not cross the blood-brain barrier quite as aggressively as oxybutynin, but that does not mean it is safe for your brain. A 2008 study in the journal Drugs and Aging compared the cognitive effects of several bladder medications in adults over 65. Tultradine users showed measurable declines in verbal learning and memory recall after 12 weeks of use compared to baseline. The declines were less dramatic than oxybutynin, but were still statistically significant. A larger population-based study published in 2019 in Alzheimer's and Dementia Journal followed over 280,000 patients in the United Kingdom. The researchers found that all anticholinergic bladder medications, including toltarine, were associated with a dose-dependent increase in dementia risk. The term dose-dependent means the more you take and the longer you take it, the higher the risk climbs. Patients who had the equivalent of 3 or more years of daily use had dementia risks that were 30 to 40% higher than non-users. What concerns researchers most is the cumulative anticholinergic burden. Every anticholinergic drug you take adds up. If you are taking toltardine for your bladder plus an antihistamine for allergies plus something else on this list, the combined effect on your brain multiplies. Doctors now use something called the anticholinergic cognitive burden scale to measure a patient's total exposure. Safer bladder treatments include the already mentioned Miragron, which works without blocking acetylcholine at all. Behavioral approaches like timed voiding, where you urinate on a set schedule rather than waiting for urgency, have been shown in studies to reduce incontinence episodes by up to 50%. Botox injections into the bladder muscle are another FDA-approved option that works locally without any brain involvement. Now, moving on to number 5, we are getting into medications that are shockingly common among older adults. Number 5, amitriptyline. Amitriptyline is one of the oldest antidepressants still in use today. It belongs to a class called tricyclic antidepressants. And while it was originally developed for depression, doctors now prescribe it for all sorts of conditions. Chronic pain, migraines, fibromyalgia, nerve pain, and even insomnia. It is incredibly versatile, which is why it remains popular despite being developed in the 1960s. But amitriptyline also happens to have some of the strongest anticholinergic properties of any medication on the market. A 2015 study published in JAMA Internal Medicine by researchers at the University of Washington is one of the most cited papers on this topic. They followed 3,434 adults aged 65 and older for over 7 years and tracked their use of anticholinergic medications. Among the drugs studied, tricyclic antidepressants like amitriptyline showed some of the strongest associations with dementia. Participants in the highest use category had a 54% increased risk of developing dementia. Brain autopsy studies have also provided direct evidence. A 2016 study published in Neurology examined the brains of deceased patients who had taken anticholinergic drugs during their lifetimes. They found more amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles, the hallmark pathological features of Alzheimer's disease in the brains of anticholinergic drug users. Amitriptyline was among the most commonly identified medications in this group. What makes amitriptyline especially problematic is that doctors often prescribe it at low doses for pain or sleep, and patients end up taking it for years. They may only take 10 or 25 milligrams at night, but over 5 or 10 years, the cumulative anticholinergic exposure becomes enormous. For chronic pain, alternatives like duloxetine, brand name Cymbalta, offer pain relief through a different mechanism with far less anticholinergic activity. For migraines, newer preventive treatments including CGRP inhibitors such as adalimumab have shown excellent results with no anticholinergic effects for sleep. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia has been endorsed by the American College of Physicians as the first-line treatment over any medication. Next, at number 4, we have a medication that people take every single night without thinking twice about it. Number 4, Dosip. When older adults struggle with insomnia, doctors sometimes prescribe Dosipin at low doses, at very small doses like 3 to 6 mg sold under the brand name Siliner. Doxepin works as a sleep aid by blocking histamine receptors. At these tiny doses, the anticholinergic effects are minimal. But here is where things go wrong. Duxapin has been around for decades as a full-strength antidepressant, and many patients are still prescribed 25 to 150 milligrams per night. At these higher doses, Dosipin becomes a powerful anticholinergic drug. A 2014 meta-analysis published in JAMA Internal Medicine reviewed 27 studies involving over 100,000 patients and confirmed that anticholinergic antidepressants, including higher Dosipin, significantly increased the risk of cognitive impairment and dementia in older adults. The risk was proportional to the dose and duration of use. Another study published in the British Journal of Clinical Pharmacology in 2017 specifically examined sedating medications used for insomnia in adults over 65. They found that anticholinergic sleep aids were associated with a 36% higher risk of dementia diagnosis within 5 years compared to non-anticholinergic sleep aids. Older adults metabolized oxypin more slowly than younger people. What that means is the drug stays in the system longer, blocking acetylcholine receptors for extended periods. A younger person might clear the drug in 8 hours, but in someone over 65, it can linger for 15 to 20 hours. So, if you are taking it nightly, you essentially have a constant anticholinergic presence in your brain around the clock. The alternatives for insomnia are actually quite effective. Melatonin at doses of 0.5 to 3 milligrams has been shown to help with sleep onset in older adults with fewer side effects. Silverexant brand name Belamra works by blocking orexin receptors and has no anticholinergic activity. A 2020 clinical trial published in Sleep showed Seevor improved sleep duration by an average of 28 minutes per night without impairing next-day cognition. But the gold standard remains cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which addresses the root causes of poor sleep rather than masking them with chemicals. Let us continue to number 3, and this one affects millions of people dealing with stomach problems. Number 3, ranitidine. Ranitidine, once sold under the wildly popular brand name Zantac, was one of the best-selling medications in the entire world. Millions of people used it daily for heartburn, acid reflux, and stomach ulcers. In 2020, the FDA pulled ranitidine from the market entirely because it was found to contain a probable carcinogen called NDMA that increased over time, especially when stored at higher temperatures. But even before that recall, researchers had raised concerns about ranitidine's effects on the brain. Ranitidine is an H2 blocker, meaning it reduces stomach acid by blocking histamine 2 receptors. While H2 blockers are generally not classified as traditional anticholinergics, studies have shown that some, particularly ryanitine and cimetidine, exhibit weak anticholinergic properties. A 2007 study published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society found that H2 blocker use in older adults was associated with an increased risk of cognitive decline. Participants using these drugs scored 2.4 points lower on cognitive assessment tests over a 2-year period compared to non-users. A separate 2016 German study published in JAMA Neurology tracked over 73,000 patients aged 75 and older and found that regular use of H2 blockers was associated with a 24% higher risk of dementia. The mechanism may involve more than just anticholinergic activity. Ranitidine can affect the absorption of vitamin B12, a nutrient that is essential for maintaining the myelin sheath, the protective covering around nerve fibers in the brain. A 2013 study in the Journal of the American Medical Association linked long-term acid-suppressing medication use to a 65% increased risk of B12 deficiency. And B12 deficiency itself has been conclusively linked to cognitive decline and dementia-like symptoms. Since ryanitine is no longer available, some people have switched to photonidine, brand name Pepcid, which has a weaker anticholinergic profile. Even better, many cases of chronic heartburn can be managed through lifestyle modifications. Elevating the head of the bed by 6 inches, avoiding eating 3 hours before sleep, and reducing trigger foods like caffeine, chocolate, and spicy meals can reduce reflux episodes by up to 40%, according to gastroenterology guidelines. Coming in at number 2, we have a drug that almost everyone has in their medicine cabinet right now. Number 2, dihydramine. Dihydramine is everywhere. You know it as Benadryl, but it is also the active ingredient in most over-the-counter sleep aids, including Squill, Tylenol PM, Advil, PM, and dozens of generic sleep products. Walk down any pharmacy aisle and you will see it in nearly every nighttime cold, allergy, and sleep product on the shelf. And that ubiquity is exactly what makes it so dangerous for older adults. Dihydramine is a first-generation antihistamine with extremely potent anticholinergic effects. A 2015 landmark study from the University of Washington, published in JAMA Internal Medicine, remains the most cited research on this topic. The team followed 3,434 participants aged 65 and older for an average of 7.3 years. They found that cumulative use of anticholinergic drugs like dihydramine was associated with a significantly increased risk of dementia. Those in the highest exposure group, equivalent to taking a standard dose daily for 3 or more years, had a 54% higher risk of dementia. Importantly, the risk was dose responsive, meaning even moderate use carried elevated risk. A 2019 British study published in JAMA Internal Medicine corroborated these findings in a massive cohort of over 284,000 patients aged 55 and older. This study found that anticholinergic drugs with antihistamines and antidepressants leading the list were associated with a 49% increased dementia risk at the highest exposure levels. The effect remained significant even when drug use was stopped up to 20 years before diagnosis. Dihydroamine's effects on the aging brain are rapid. A study at Indiana University used brain imaging to show that just one dose of dihydroamine reduced brain activity in regions responsible for memory and attention in healthy older adults. Reaction times slowed by an average of 22%, and short-term memory scores dropped by 32% compared to placebo. In older adults, the drug's half-life extends significantly, meaning it stays active in the body far longer than in younger people. Someone taking it at 10 p.m. might still have significant blood levels the following afternoon, walking around in a cognitive fog without realizing why. The safer alternatives for allergy relief include the second-generation antihistamines we mentioned earlier, like satizine, laoretine, and fexofenadine for sleep, melatonin at low doses, and cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia are far superior long-term solutions. Now we arrive at the number one medication on our list, and this one is by far the most alarming. Number one, proton pump inhibitors. Proton pump inhibitors, commonly known as PPIs, are the number one medication on this list for a very important reason. They are among the most widely used drugs in the entire world. Omeprazole sold as Prilosec, Omeprazole sold as Nexium. Lansoprazole sold as Prevacid. Pantoprazole sold as Protonix. Nearly 1 in 4 adults over 60 takes a PPI regularly, and many have been on them for years or even decades. They are available over the counter, and people often start taking them and simply never stop. A groundbreaking 2016 study published in JAMA Neurology followed over 73,000 adults aged 75 and older in Germany for an average of 5 years. The researchers found that regular PPI users had a 44% higher risk of developing dementia compared to non-users. That is not a small number. A follow-up analysis published in 2019 in Alzheimer's and Dementia Journal examined data from over 130,000 patients and confirmed a dose-dependent relationship. Those taking PPIs for more than 3 years had a 54% increased risk of dementia. The mechanisms behind this link are multiple and deeply concerning. First, PPIs may cross the blood-brain barrier and directly increase the production of amyloid beta, the toxic protein that forms the plaques found in Alzheimer's disease. A 2013 laboratory study published in PLO showed that PPIs increased amyloid beta levels in the brains of mice by 30 to 40%. Second, PPIs severely reduce the absorption of critical brain nutrients. They decrease vitamin B12 absorption by up to 65%, according to a study in the Journal of the American Medical Association. They also interfere with magnesium absorption by reducing the stomach acid your body needs to properly break down and absorb essential minerals. Magnesium plays a critical role in hundreds of biochemical reactions throughout the body, including those involved in memory, concentration, nerve function, and overall brain health. When magnesium levels gradually decline over time, the effects can be subtle at first, but may eventually contribute to cognitive problems, fatigue, and impaired neurological function. The problem doesn't stop there. PPIs can also reduce calcium absorption, another mineral that depends on adequate stomach acid for efficient uptake. Calcium is not only important for maintaining strong bones, but it also plays a vital role in nerve cell communication. Every thought, memory, and signal transmitted throughout your brain relies on precise calcium regulation. When calcium absorption is compromised for years, it may negatively affect the delicate signaling networks that keep the brain functioning at its best. Third, PPIs can significantly alter the gut microbiome. A study published in the journal Gut in 2016 found that people taking proton pump inhibitors had substantially lower microbial diversity compared to those who were not using these medications. This matters because the gut microbiome is far more than a collection of digestive bacteria. It acts as a powerful regulator of immune function, inflammation, metabolism, and even brain health. Scientists now recognize the gut-brain axis as a complex communication network linking the digestive system directly to the brain. Through this connection, gut bacteria influence mood, memory, cognition, and neurological health. When long-term PPI disrupts the balance of beneficial microbes, it can promote chronic low-grade inflammation throughout the body. Over time, that inflammation may reach the brain, potentially contributing to the processes associated with neurodegeneration and age-related cognitive decline. Fourth, and perhaps most concerning, more recent research has raised questions about the relationship between prolonged PPI use and dementia risk. A 2022 study published in Neurology followed more than 5,700 cognitively healthy adults aged 45 and older. Researchers observed that individuals who had used PP continuously for more than 4.4 years were associated with a 33% greater risk of developing dementia during the follow-up period compared to those who did not use the medications long-term. While this study does not prove that PP directly caused dementia, the findings add to a growing body of evidence suggesting that extended use may have consequences beyond the stomach. Combined with the effects on vitamin B12, magnesium, calcium absorption, and gut microbiome health, these findings raise important questions about whether long-term PPI use could contribute to cognitive decline in some individuals as they age.